Before a single accusation was spoken, before a single miracle stunned a crowd, before a single word was uttered from a cradle, there was a woman whose name Allah Himself chose to preserve forever. A woman whose honor was written in Revelation, whose purity was defended not by people but by the Lord of the worlds, and whose story still shakes hearts centuries later. This is not just a story of a miracle, it is a story of divine selection, silent strength, and a defense that came directly from the heavens. Thank you for watching Islamic Insight channel. From which country are you watching this video? If you love learning about Islam, about the Quran, and about the lives Allah Himself honored, make sure you subscribe and stay with us until the end, because the lesson hidden in this story may change the way you understand trials forever. Mariam, peace be upon her, is not introduced in the Quran casually, and she is not mentioned as a supporting figure in the shadow of others. Allah names her directly, something He does not do for any other woman, and He dedicates an entire chapter of the Quran to her name alone. This is not coincidence, and it is not symbolism. It is divine emphasis. Allah wanted her name recited, remembered, questioned, and reflected upon until the end of time. From the very beginning, her life was marked by distinction, not because of lineage alone, but because Allah chose her for a purpose far greater than she could ever imagine. Her story begins not with a miracle, but with devotion, not with attention, but with obscurity, not with praise, but with preparation. She was raised away from noise, away from corruption, away from the expectations of people, growing in a space where the only focus was worship, sincerity, and complete reliance upon Allah. Her mother had dedicated her before she was even born, offering her unborn child entirely to the service of Allah. This was a sincere vow, and Allah accepted it. When Mariam was born, Allah placed her under special care, arranging for her upbringing to unfold within the sacred environment of the place of worship. She was placed under the guardianship of the prophet Zachariah, peace be upon him, a man of righteousness and wisdom, and even he would witness signs around her that defied explanation. Every time he entered her chamber, he found provision with her, sustenance that did not match the season, food that had no visible source. When he asked her about it, her response was calm and firm, free of doubt or pride. She said it was from Allah. That answer alone reveals her heart. She did not claim virtue. She did not explain mechanisms. She attributed everything to Allah, showing that her connection to Him was not theoretical but lived. This was not a child raised for the world. This was a soul being prepared for a test that would shake history. Maryam grew in purity, in silence, in devotion, and in discipline. She was not known for public speech, leadership, or debate. She was known for her worship, her humility, and her distance from worldly distraction. Allah was shaping her character long before revealing her destiny. Every moment of isolation was preparation. Every unanswered question was training. Every quiet act of worship was strengthening her heart for what was coming, and then Allah Himself declared her status in words that no human praise could ever match. He announced that He had chosen her, purified her, and preferred her above the women of all nations. This declaration is not light, and it is not symbolic. Allah does not speak without purpose. To be chosen by Allah is not merely an honor, it is a responsibility. It means that the path ahead will not be easy, because elevation in the sight of Allah often comes with trials that only the sincere can endure. Mariam was chosen not for comfort, but for endurance, not for ease, but for trust, not for applause, but for silence. She lived a life that looked small to people, but immense in the sight of Allah. She worshipped when no one watched, obeyed when no one praised, and trusted when no one understood. And it was precisely this hidden devotion that made her worthy of being the center of one of the greatest signs Allah would ever place before humanity. Before the miracle, before the accusation, before the defense, there was a woman who knew Allah in private. That is the part most people overlook. Mariam was not elevated in the moment of crisis. She was elevated long before it, in prayer, in patience, and in purity. And it is from this foundation that the greatest test of her life would emerge, a test that would expose human judgment, reveal divine wisdom, and teach a lesson about trust that still echoes through the Quran today. Mariam, peace be upon her, withdrew from her people, not because she sought isolation for comfort, but because devotion often requires distance from distraction. The Quran describes her retreat as deliberate and intentional, a separation toward the east, a place of quiet where the world fell away and only her relationship with Allah remained. This moment is critical because it was not a random encounter that followed. It was not chaos. It was divine timing meeting a servant in a state of purity and surrender. In that solitude, when no human eyes watched and no human voices echoed, the angel Jibril appeared before her in the form of a man. The shock of this moment cannot be overstated. Mariam had lived a life guarded by modesty and chastity, and suddenly a man stood before her in isolation. Her immediate reaction was not curiosity, not fear alone, but instinctive reliance upon Allah. She sought refuge in him instantly, declaring her consciousness of Allah and her commitment to purity. This response reveals everything about her character. Even in shock, even in confusion, her heart turned first to Allah, not to assumption, not to panic, but to trust. It was in that vulnerable moment that the decree was delivered. She was informed that she would bear a child, not through a man, but through the command of Allah alone. The words were calm, but the weight was crushing. This was not simply news of a miracle. This was news of a trial that would dismantle her life as she knew it. She understood immediately what this meant. She understood the laws of society, the whispers of people, the judgment that would follow. Her question was not one of disbelief in the power of Allah, but of human consequence. How could this be when she had lived a life untouched, when she had guarded herself completely? The response she received was not a long explanation, not reassurance of ease, but a declaration of divine will. Allah decrees what He wills. This child would be a sign for mankind and a mercy from Him. The matter was already decided. From that moment forward, Mariam carried not only a child, but a burden few could imagine. Every step she took afterward was taken with knowledge of what awaited her. The pregnancy was not celebrated. It was concealed. She withdrew further from her people, retreating deeper into isolation, not out of shame, but out of necessity. The Quran does not romanticize this phase. It presents it with stark realism. Mariam endured the physical reality of pregnancy alongside the emotional weight of anticipation, knowing that no explanation would be accepted, knowing that silence would be her only refuge. This was not the silence of weakness, but the silence of obedience. Allah was shaping the moment of defense long before it arrived. When the time of childbirth came, it came in complete solitude. No family surrounded her, no community supported her, no familiar hands comforted her. She found herself alone beside the trunk of a palm tree, overwhelmed by pain that was physical, emotional, and spiritual all at once. The Quran records her words in that moment, words that reflect not disbelief, but exhaustion. She wished she had passed away before this, that she had been forgotten entirely. This statement is not a condemnation of her faith, it is evidence of her humanity. Even the most honored servants of Allah feel the weight of trials when they are pushed beyond human limits. Her pain was real. Her fear was real. Her loneliness was real. And it was precisely there, at her lowest point, that Allah intervened. A voice called out to her, reassuring her that she was not abandoned. Allah provided for her directly, causing water to flow beneath her and dates to fall from the palm tree above her. This provision was not merely physical nourishment, it was emotional reassurance. It was a message that even in isolation, even in pain, even when the world seemed closed in judgment, Allah was present and watching. She was instructed to eat, drink, and find comfort. This moment reveals a profound truth. Allah does not remove hardship immediately, but He provides strength within it. Mariam still had to face her people. The accusations were still coming, but she was no longer alone. Then came one of the most difficult commands she would receive. She was instructed not to speak, to observe a fast from speech, to say nothing in her own defense. This command goes against human instinct. Every part of a person wants to explain, to clarify, to defend their honor. But Allah was teaching Mariam a lesson that would echo through generations. This defense would not come through her words. It would come through His power. Her role was patience. His role was vindication. By commanding her silence, Allah was removing any possibility of doubt. No one could claim she crafted a story or manipulated emotion. The defense would be undeniable. So Mariam returned to her people carrying the child. Every step toward them was a step toward confrontation. The Quran does not describe her emotions in detail here, but they can be felt between the lines. She knew what they would say. She knew how they would react. And when they saw her, their accusations were immediate and harsh. They reminded her of her lineage, of her family, of the reputation she carried, and they accused her of something they believed impossible for someone like her. Through it all, Mariam remained silent. She did not lower her gaze in shame. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply pointed to the child. To them, this was incomprehensible. How could a baby speak? How could an infant respond? But this was the moment Allah had prepared from the very beginning. Every moment of her upbringing, every act of worship, every moment of isolation, every tear shed in silence, every pain endured alone, had led to this point. The defense was no longer hers to give. It belonged to Allah alone. And when the infant spoke, declaring servitude to Allah and announcing His prophethood, the accusations collapsed instantly. No argument could stand, no doubt could survive. Allah had defended Mariam in a way no human defense could ever achieve. This is the heart of the lesson most people miss. Mariam was not defended because she demanded justice. She was defended because she trusted Allah completely. Her silence was not weakness, it was obedience. Her isolation was not abandonment, it was preparation. Her pain was not punishment, it was elevation. And when Allah defends a servant, He does so in a way that leaves no room for doubt, no space for accusation, and no need for explanation. After the command of silence was given, Mariam, peace be upon her, carried a responsibility heavier than words could describe. Silence is easy when there is no accusation, but silence in the face of judgment, suspicion, and public outrage requires a level of trust that few ever reach. She was instructed not merely to remain quiet, but to fully surrender her defense to Allah. This was not passive acceptance. This was active obedience. Every step she took back toward her people was a step into confrontation, and yet she carried herself with the dignity of someone who knew that the outcome was already written by Allah. The Quran does not record her hesitation, but the gravity of the moment is unmistakable. She was returning not just with a child, but with a divine sign that no one yet understood. Her silence was not emptiness. It was filled with reliance, patience, and certainty that Allah does not abandon those who surrender to Him completely. When her people saw her, the shock was immediate. They did not approach her with curiosity or compassion, they approached her with accusation. Their words were sharp and cutting, reminding her of her family, her lineage, and the reputation she carried among them. They could not reconcile what they saw with what they believed they knew about her. To them, the sight of Mariam carrying a child was not a mystery to be contemplated, but a scandal to be condemned. The accusations were not subtle. They were direct, public, and humiliating. They questioned her honor and implied a betrayal so severe that it shattered the image they had held of her all her life. This was the moment where most people would break. This was the moment where tears, explanations, anger, or desperation would spill out. But Mariam did none of that. She said nothing. She did exactly as Allah commanded. Her silence in that moment is one of the most powerful acts of faith recorded in the Quran. She did not interrupt them. She did not attempt to soften their words. She did not try to defend herself, even when her honor was being torn apart in front of her. Instead, she calmly pointed toward the child in her arms. To them, this gesture was almost offensive. They responded with disbelief and mockery, questioning how an infant in the cradle could possibly speak. In their minds, this only confirmed what they believed, but they did not realize that they were standing on the edge of a moment that would redefine history. They thought they were exposing a scandal. In reality, Allah was about to expose the limits of human judgment. Then came the moment that Allah had prepared long before the accusation was ever spoken. The infant Isa, peace be upon him, spoke. Not with random sounds or childish noise, but with clarity, authority, and purpose. His first words were not about his mother defending herself. His first words were a declaration of servitude to Allah. He announced that he was a servant of Allah, that he had been given revelation, that he was a prophet, and that he had been commanded with prayer and charity for as long as he lived. In that single moment, every accusation collapsed. No explanation from Mariam could ever have matched this defense. No argument could survive it. No doubt could stand against it. Allah himself had spoken through a miracle that left no room for interpretation. This was not just a defense of Mariam, it was a lesson for all of humanity. Allah showed that he does not need his servants to shout their innocence. He does not require elaborate explanations or emotional appeals. When Allah chooses to defend someone, he does so in a way that transcends human language and logic. Mariam was vindicated not because she argued well, but because she trusted completely. Her silence allowed Allah to speak. Her patience allowed Allah to reveal the truth in the most undeniable way possible. The people who accused her were left speechless, confronted not by her words, but by a sign that came directly from Allah. What makes this moment even more profound is that Allah did not defend Mariam immediately when the pregnancy began. He allowed time to pass. He allowed whispers to form. He allowed suspicion to grow. This delay was not neglect, it was wisdom. By allowing the accusation to reach its peak, Allah ensured that the defense would be absolute. When Isa spoke, there was no alternative explanation. There was no room to question motives or intentions. The truth stood on its own. This teaches a lesson that is deeply uncomfortable for many hearts. Sometimes Allah allows his sincere servants to endure misunderstanding, isolation, and judgment, not because he is displeased with them, but because he is preparing a greater outcome that could not exist without patience. Mariam's story shows that honor in the sight of Allah is not always accompanied by comfort in the sight of people. She endured the most severe form of social judgment, yet Allah elevated her status beyond imagination. Her name became a chapter of the Quran. Her story became a sign for all people. Her silence became a lesson in trust that continues to challenge believers today. When people speak against you unjustly, when explanations fail, when words only seem to deepen suspicion, Mariam's story teaches that sometimes the most powerful response is obedience and patience, leaving the outcome entirely to Allah. The moment Isa spoke was not just a miraculous event, it was the culmination of years of devotion, purity, and surrender. Every prayer Mariam had offered in solitude, every moment of restraint, every act of worship unseen by people had led to this defense. Allah does not waste sincerity. He does not overlook patience. And he does not abandon those who rely upon him even when the world turns against them. Mariam walked into accusation carrying silence and walked out carrying honor written by Allah himself. And that is why her story continues to live, not as a tale of scandal, but as one of the greatest examples of trust, patience, and divine justice the Quran has ever revealed. What happened to Mariam, peace be upon her, did not end when the accusations fell silent and the miracle was witnessed. In reality, that moment marked the beginning of a deeper lesson that Allah intended for every generation that would come after. Allah did not defend Maryam in a conventional way, and he did not choose a method that aligned with human expectations. He did not allow her to speak eloquently in her own defense, nor did he soften the hearts of the people before the confrontation. Instead, Allah allowed events to unfold in a way that exposed the limits of human judgment and the depth of divine wisdom. This teaches a powerful truth that many people struggle to accept. Allah does not operate according to our emotional urgency. He operates according to perfect knowledge. If Maryam had been allowed to explain herself, doubt would have remained. People could have argued, questioned her words, or twisted her explanation. By commanding her silence, Allah ensured that the truth would come from a source no one could dispute. The defense came not through persuasion, but through certainty. Not through emotion, but through revelation. This is where the lesson most people miss becomes clear. Silence in obedience is not weakness. It is strength anchored in trust. Maryam did not remain silent because she had nothing to say. She remained silent because Allah told her to. That obedience transformed her silence into worship. It turned restraint into elevation. In a world where people rush to defend themselves, to clear their names, and to prove their worth, Maryam's story stands as a reminder that honor does not come from winning arguments. It comes from being known by Allah. Sometimes the greatest victory is not being heard by people, but being seen by Allah. When a servant entrusts their reputation to Allah, he takes responsibility for the outcome in ways no human effort could achieve. Allah's defense of Maryam also reveals something profound about the nature of trials. Trials are not always signs of displeasure. Sometimes they are signs of selection. Maryam was not tested because she was weak. She was tested because she was strong enough to carry the test. Allah knew her heart. He knew her sincerity. He knew her capacity for patience. And he knew that through her trial, a lesson would be delivered to humanity that could not be delivered any other way. The severity of her test was matched only by the magnitude of her honor. Her name was not cleared quietly. It was immortalized in revelation. Her story was not forgotten. It was recited in prayer. Her pain was not wasted. It became guidance. This story speaks directly to anyone who has ever been misunderstood, falsely accused, or judged without mercy. It teaches that there are moments when speaking does not bring clarity, when explaining does not bring relief, and when defending oneself only deepens the wound. In those moments, Maryam's example teaches that patience is not passive, it is active reliance upon Allah. It is choosing obedience over impulse. It is trusting that Allah hears what people say, even when you say nothing, and it is believing that when the time is right, Allah will make the truth clearer than any argument ever could. The Quran does not present Maryam as a distant figure of the past. It presents her as a living lesson. Her story is meant to shape hearts, not just inform minds. Allah shows through her life that sincerity in private outweighs reputation in public. Maryam's years of quiet worship mattered more than a single moment of public judgment. Her closeness to Allah mattered more than the opinions of people. And when Allah chose to defend her, He did so in a way that elevated her beyond the reach of slander forever. No accusation against her survived revelation. No doubt about her purity remained. Her honor was sealed by Allah Himself. The legacy of Maryam continues far beyond her lifetime. Her name is mentioned with reverence by believers across the world. Her story is recited as a sign of divine power and mercy. Her patience is held as an example of unwavering faith, and her trust in Allah remains a guide for those navigating trials they cannot control. Allah did not promise that His righteous servants would never face hardship, but He showed through Maryam that hardship does not define worth. Faith does, obedience does, trust does. When Allah writes the story of a servant, He does not waste a single moment of pain. Every tear has meaning, every silence has purpose, every delay has wisdom. Maryam's story ends not with shame, but with honor that continues until the end of time. It reminds us that when Allah defends someone, no accusation can survive. When Allah elevates someone, no trial can diminish them. And when Allah chooses a servant, even the most painful moments become part of a divine plan greater than anything the human eye can see. This is why the story of Maryam, peace be upon her, still speaks today. It speaks to those who feel alone in their obedience. It speaks to those whose sincerity is unseen. It speaks to those who carry burdens they did not choose. And it speaks with a promise that remains true across every generation. Trust Allah completely, even when the path is dark, even when the voices are loud, even when silence feels unbearable. Because when Allah defends you, He does so perfectly, completely, and in a way that leaves no room for doubt.